Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for coming out here this morning. I'm going to ask some very pointed questions purely to wrap my brain around why it took so long. And the reason that I'm going to ask them this way is there was railroad tracks behind my house, at my parents' house. And I lived there from boy, did I just age myself, 1980. And I think the railway ran for about 15 years. And in the very, very early 80s, at 2 o'clock in the morning, a train derailed behind my house. A 100-year flood storm, one of the wildest storms you ever saw. Anhydrous ammonia tankers flipped over on their side right in our backyard. And I will say that the first responders were there like fast, like super duper duper fast. And we had more people running around in our backyard to stop the leaks, so on and so forth. So because I also lived with the train tracks for so long, I know there's always maintenance vehicles. Pickup trucks that drive down the road, they get to a cross section, they put the rails down, and they drive. Can you explain to me why, and I realize it's a question for CN, so I appreciate the fact that you could defer to them. But could you explain to me why they couldn't get a maintenance truck from a road, either from the front of the train on the tracks or from the back of the train, the tracks, to the train, cut the tree off?
Thank you for the question, MP Lewis. CN, I think Mr. Landry previously mentioned, one CN crew had a road accident in the snow conditions and was delayed on responding. Another crew did respond to the site via high rail. The vehicles were referred to as a high rail. But at that time, due to the winds, they determined they couldn't cut it at that time. There was another tree down in front of train 69 at this point, so that crew relocated to move the tree they could to advance train 69. All of which to say that CN was attempting to move the tree and did access the train on at least 2 occasions via high rail. But those emergency crews were performing activities along to keep the network fluid, and that allowed our other trains to proceed.
Okay, thank you for that. So does the rail system, I'm going to say your mandate from Transport Canada, does it mirror what the mandate for the aviation system is? Meaning, I don't know the exact amount of time that airliners are allowed to leave people on the tarmac, but I know there's a number to it. Is it the same for trains?
I don't believe we have a similar framework that the airlines do.
So do you believe that then if you had that type of framework in place, that would have been easier for your folks to make the decision that, listen, we're past this amount of time, therefore we have to put these emergency responses in place? Is that something that you believe would have been helpful?
I mean, we've developed our own, obviously our own protocols to deal with unusual circumstances or these service disruptions. And I think it also loops back to the discussions we had earlier about passenger rights, because it is linked to an ecosystem view in our ability to actually work in this ecosystem. And this is not solely a Via Rail discussion. I think it has to include the host railways in an integrated fashion, so that we don't solution a part of the problem and then have not solution another part that creates an additional friction to the passenger experience.
Thank you, and I'm glad that you brought up passengers' rights. Canadians are very passionate and compassionate people, and they're very understanding folks, but they still want their freedoms. And I can only imagine being on a train for 13 hours sitting there, and I appreciate the fact that you talked about the communication, but I'm not surprised that there was a couple of folks that said, you know what, enough's enough, I got to get off. And so I think it would be very helpful, and I really think that the minister's office should be the one driving this forward. I think that if the aviation, all of our rail systems mirror each other, it makes the jobs of the companies a lot easier to make decisions at tough times, especially over Christmas. So thanks to you very much for your testimony and for your answers.